China's economic crisis deepens, President Xi Jinping has called for patience and resilience. A Communist Party mouthpiece has highlighted a speech given by Xi where he appealed to the people of China to exhibit patience and resilience in the pursuit of what he calls national rejuvenation. Xi was addressing hundreds of top party members during his 7th February speech, part of which was published in an official journal this week, hours after Beijing released more disappointing monthly economic data. This article emphasized the difficulties of modernizing a country of China's size and said its unique development model was still its best hope. It asked the public to take the long view and stay focused, balancing progress and stability with sustainability. Xi Jinping was quoted as saying, "We should first consider the size of the population and the large rural-urban development gap. We cannot be ambitious and unrealistic, but we cannot simply follow the beaten path. We should be patient with a historical perspective and move forward in a steadfast manner." Xi gave this speech months after his historic third term as party leader began in October and ahead of the annual parliamentary meetings in Beijing. He repeated his major policy initiatives: common prosperity, the green economy, and upholding socialist values as the cornerstone of China's development. He talked about focusing on the task of steering one of the world's most populous countries towards a national renaissance and stressed on the need for patience and perseverance. He said, "A super big population can provide sufficient manpower and a super big domestic market, but it also brings about a series of difficulties and challenges. It is quite a challenge just to make sure that 1.4 billion people are fed. Then there are problems such as employment, wealth distribution, education, healthcare, housing, elderly care, and childcare. These are not easy to resolve and involve an astronomical number of people." Now, this article came out after China published a raft of weak economic data showing sluggish retail sales, industrial production, and property investment. Beijing has stopped releasing youth unemployment data, which hit a record high of 21.3% in June. The latest economic data has prompted fears about the country's slowdown, which analysts say will not be turned around by measures such as interest rate cuts that have been announced recently. China has also been reeling under widespread flooding in recent weeks, while there is growing pressure from demographic problems such as a low birth rate and a rapidly graying society. Xi also spoke about the middle income trap, where countries fail to emerge as high income nations. He said some developing countries have almost reached the threshold of developed countries in their process of modernization, but they have fallen into the middle income trap and been stuck in stagnation for a long time or even backtracked substantially. One of the reasons is that they have not resolved social polarization and stratification. She said the common prosperity policy was a long-term mission that must be carried out persistently and make continuous progress. Calling the policy the essence of Chinese modernization, Xi Jinping condemned Western modernization, saying it maximized the interests of capitalists and was characterized by wars, slavery, colonization, and exploitation. Common prosperity, a policy aimed at narrowing the wealth gap, has caused anxiety among entrepreneurs and foreign companies in recent years, but Beijing denies that it is seeking to suppress private enterprises. Observers say at a time when an economic crisis is looming, the party wants to paint a rosy picture to ensure that people see the goals that she has set as being realistic and believe that China's path is unique and better than that of the West.
身边朋友都那么说，都说毕业肯定就是失业，但是具体的，毕竟我现在才大一嘛，也没有什么具体的想法。我觉得还是等到大二、大三的时候再具体做考虑吧。担心啊，肯定你要是往那个方面想，那肯定非常非常担心。但是，哎，反正先大一嘛，就先不想再说。
这东西还是分行业了。就是像我们在的就是 IT 行业，可能说还好找一些。你比如像传统行业，可能说现在确实就业压力是比较大的，年轻人确实就业压力稍微大一些。就是像我身边，比如像我表弟啊，或者说一些表弟的同学，目前可能更倾向于就是学习，然后争取上岸，对，考公这类的。
We have taken a note of relevant arguments which run counter to facts In fact, the Chinese economy continues to recover and is, on the whole, improving and remains an important engine for world economic growth.
All right. I'm going back to Xi at this point and hoping he can decode this interesting speech by Xi Jinping. Xi, while some observers have said that, the Communist Party is just trying to paint a rosy picture and lull the Chinese people into believing that all is well and that their model is better than that of the West. But the way I look at it, to me, Xi sounds rather defensive in this speech. For him, the most powerful man in China and the most powerful leader of China in modern times, to say it is a challenge to even feed 1.4 billion people. And for him to say, that people must exhibit patience and resilience in this time of national rejuvenation. Would you not say that this is perhaps the clearest admission yet by the man at the top that the economic crisis in China is real and it's a source of worry, and that the Chinese people are indeed restless?
Absolutely, Neha. I think you hit the nail on the head. China at this moment is facing what I would call its worst economic crisis in nearly 40 years. It's a country which has been used to heady growth of 10%. And now suddenly you're looking at a 3% rate of growth, annualized rate of growth, although China's own target is only 5%, which is half of what it has been experiencing for better part of, for the last 30 years. So this is a big crisis. And what has made it worse are two things. One, of course, COVID, which has, impacted rural incomes in a very significant way. And let us not forget that China is still an agrarian economy. There is the majority of people in China live in villages, and their incomes have come down significantly, Neha. The other thing is, because China took on a lot of debt internally, and it built a lot of vanity infrastructure projects in real estate and in roads and other infrastructure. Now, these are unproductive assets. So Xi Jinping himself changed course and said that China must only grow at a pace which its own domestic consumption plus realistic exports allow it to grow. So that means there has to be a reset, an economic reset that China needs to do to comply with Mr. Xi Jinping's policy of growing at a realistic level. Now, that is necessarily going to cause pain to a whole lot of people, a vast majority of Chinese population, Neha. And this is Mr. Xi Jinping basically telling them that please bear with me while we go through this correction. But, people are not going to be convinced by that. So the big worry for Mr. Xi Jinping, especially when employment among youth goes up, is the social consequence of this reduction in prosperity, this, growth in unemployment and the relative poverty that people are going to witness. So that is going to become a social challenge. And at some point, this will very much threaten his own position as the leader of China. And don't forget that there are others in the Communist Party who are waiting on the sidelines for a weak movement to displace Mr. Xi Jinping and take the power. So it's not as if he's completely safe from the fallout of this economic slowdown. So that is why he's pleading with the people of China to be patient and to look at this progress as a step-by-step progress and not as a radical. But what doesn't help, I think, is basically tarnishing a Western development or telling people that don't be dazzled by materialism West, because those are empty words. West is definitely, it has given a higher quality of life to its own people on an average. And with 1.4 billion people, China, despite its prosperity, it's the second largest economy in the world today. It's still far away from those goals, from the social goals of giving its people a high quality of life or stable incomes and prosperity. So this is going to be a very difficult situation for Mr. Xi Jinping to manage, Neha, and hence the call for patience and belief in step-by-step progress.
Absolutely. A lot of what he has said, Sri, is little more than rhetoric, which is unlikely to cut ice with a majority of people in China who are obviously facing a lot of adversity at this point. But, correct me if I'm wrong. one of the biggest problems, as far as China is concerned, or let's say one of the things that it's most notorious for, is how everything seems to be shrouded in secrecy. The opacity around data, for instance. Just the other day, we were discussing on this show how, after hitting unprecedented levels of youth unemployment in the month of June, China decided to stop publishing the data. And a lot of young people were actually angry about it. They took to the social media and they said, yes, that is the best way of lowering unemployment rates. Stop publishing the data. Do you believe that is part of the problem? The opacity around everything contributes to the crisis. People just don't know what is going on. You just never know the full enormity of the situation. For example, we saw this in case of COVID. Till date, we do not have reliable, authentic data on how many people actually got infected with COVID in China or how many died. The same seems to be true of their economy.
Absolutely, Neha. This is definitely part of the problem because for the Communist Party, the imagery, the image management of the country is extremely important because that is how they manage this vast population of 1.4 billion people and also the global perception that it is now the new superpower which is emerging. If this narrative were to be damaged by actual real data, which were to become public, then it makes Beijing's job that much harder to convince people that it is actually the new hegemon that's rising in the world. So this is a narrative which is very carefully controlled and managed by the Communist Party and at the top leadership. But the fact is, you can fool some people sometime, Neha, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Western institutions which are investing in China or those who have stakes in China, they obviously have other sources. They have ground level reports that they can get. So you're not really fooling a whole lot of savvy investors when it comes to this. At best, you are probably managing a narrative for your own people. But those who have stakes in China and can read the economic numbers, can look at trends, are not going to be fooled by any kind of narrative or non-publishing of number that China does, because they have other sources, other means of getting those numbers and getting a fairly accurate picture of what the real economic health is of China, Neha.
Absolutely, and forget about what the real situation as far as their economy is concerned or what really happened to people there during COVID. Till date, Sri, we don't know how COVID started, the origins, the genesis of it. The entire international community, including the World Health Organization, has tried repeatedly to get to the bottom of it. Fact of the matter is, China refuses to cooperate with that investigation. We still don't know how it all started. Was it a lab leak? Who knows? We simply don't have any answers from China. That's the way that country operates.